The Golden Age of Bulgaria. By the mid-9th century the Bulgar state was the dominant power in the Balkans and extended northward to the rim of the Bohemian Plateau, where it bordered on the newly arisen Slavic Great Moravian state. Its size, however, did not ensure security. The Balkans' rugged terrain and restricted road system made administrative control difficult, and the ruler's authority in his far-flung lands was uneven and oftentimes questionable. While Byzantium remained the Bulgars' primary rival in the south, northward expansion created new outside threats, the Frank Kingdom and Moravia, from the opposite direction, placing the Bulgars at a strategic disadvantage. After unsuccessfully attempting to deal with that situation militarily, Boris I devoted the rest of his reign to skilled diplomatic maneuvers intended to secure his state both domestically and internationally. Internally, the Bulgar state's population was divided among the ruling Turkic-speaking Bulgars, a hodgepodge of Slavic-speaking tribes and a smattering of Greek-speaking former Byzantine subjects. The Bulgars appeared destined to lose the military advantages lent them by their steppe traditions because the number of elite Bulgars was declining steadily, and they faced inevitable assimilation by their sedentary subject peoples. Externally, the Bulgar state contended with an implacable Byzantine enemy on its south, the potentially dangerous Frank Kingdom to its northwest, and, after the 830s, a new Turkic steppe nomadic threat from the northeast, the Magyars. The latter were clients of the Khazars, who, in turn, were allies of the Byzantines. The Magyars' appearance raised the specter of a possible Byzantine-coordinated two-front war. Boris was aware of the innate and potential dangers to his state. While he could do little to correct the administrative problems imposed by the mountainous terrain, in an inspired decision he deftly addressed the dangers of both a divided population and possible Byzantine aggression by turning to Christianity. Christian conversion could eliminate the religious cultural barriers separating his polyglot population and cement a new common cultural bond in their place, producing a unified Bulgarian people more loyal to the central government and far easier to administer. By adopting Christianity as the official state religion, the Bulgars also would gain recognized membership in the Christian European community, which would permit normal international relations with other European states and stave off possible extinction as an alien threat by either the Byzantine or East Frank/Holy Roman empires. A transcendent consideration for Boris also may have been the universal validity that Christianity lent a ruler, who, as God's representative on earth, stood above the rest of society, like the emperor in Constantinople. Boris's active efforts to adopt Christianity for his state were precipitated in 862 when Great Moravian Prince Rostislav, 846–70, aware of the political implications of Christian conversion, requested from Emperor Michael III, 842–67, Byzantine missionaries to counteract similar German activities in Moravia in an attempt to escape Frank political suzerainty. Michael, quick to grasp the opportunity for forging a new anti-Bulgar alliance in the northwest proffered by Rostislav's petition, happily complied. In 863 he dispatched to Moravia two Greek brothers from Thessaloniki, Constantine and Methodios. The two missionaries were sons of an imperial official. Both were well educated and fluent in the Slavic dialect spoken in the immediate neighborhood of Thessaloniki. Constantine, an accomplished linguist, philosopher, and diplomat, already had at hand a Slavic alphabetical system of his own creation. Known as Glagolitic, it consisted of a complicated series of signs rooted in a mixture of Greek, Phoenician, and assorted original letters, into which Constantine had translated some basic Orthodox liturgical texts using the local Macedonian dialect. The fact that he and Methodios promptly set out for Moravia with a number of texts already translated meant that Glagolitic was created prior to the Moravian mission. The most plausible explanation is that the alphabet originally was intended for a planned future mission to the Bulgar state. Once in Moravia, the two missionaries proved so successful that the German Catholic Church leadership vehemently denounced them to the Pope. At that time the growing split between Catholic and Orthodox Christianity had not yet reached breaking point, and Orthodox clerics still considered the Pope an honored Christian patriarch. Moreover, the Byzantines acknowledged ultimate papal jurisdiction over Moravia, since it lay well north of the ecclesiastical line in the northwestern Balkans separating the spiritual domains of the Pope and the Patriarch of Constantinople. Constantine and Methodios were summoned to Rome by the Pope and they complied. The row instigated by the Germans over the Byzantine Moravian mission became known as the Three-Language Heresy. The German Church claimed that only Hebrew, Greek, and Latin were acceptable, sacred languages for the divine scriptures. In Rome, Constantine eloquently defended his new Slavic alphabet, stressing that, while Greek and Latin originally were pagan and Hebrew the language of Jews, Glagolitic was Christian from its inception. The papacy, threatened by increasing German efforts at church autonomy, sided with Constantine, who then entered a monastery in Rome, took the monastic name of Cyril, and died in 869 without returning to Moravia. Methodios was made Moravian bishop and did return, but a pro-Frank coup there in 870 ushered in a flood of German clerics who used Latin exclusively and overwhelmed Methodios's diocese. After his death in 885, his followers were expelled from Moravia by the dominant German church authorities. Various later 9th-century popes agreed with the German argument that Glagolitic was uncanonical, and its use soon died out in Moravia. While the Byzantine Moravian mission floundered, developments in the Balkans took an important turn. In 864 Emperor Michael attacked the Bulgar state with his combined Balkan and Anatolian forces while most of Boris's troops were concentrated in the north-facing Moravia. Unable to offer effective resistance, Boris immediately accepted Michael's conditions for a quick ending to the hostilities. He agreed to adopt Christianity from Constantinople, to permit Greek clergy into his state to undertake the conversion of his people, and to break off permanently an alliance with the Franks. As a friendly concession from Michael, Boris was permitted to annex a piece of territory southeast of the Balkan Mountains, called Zagora, that he already controlled. In 865 Boris was baptized a Christian and adopted the name Michael, in honor of his godfather, the emperor. A number of leading Bulgars followed Boris's example. Pagan temples throughout the Bulgar state either were destroyed or were converted into Christian churches. The Greek clergy sent by the Byzantines established a Greek-speaking ecclesiastical organization and set to converting the population. Terrified of losing their sky god Tengri's protection, and concerned over rapidly increasing Byzantine influence, a number of Bulgar boyars rebelled in 866 but were suppressed. In retaliation, Boris liquidated many of the old boyar clans, strengthened his authority by creating a new class of dependent service nobility, and imposed a new legal system modeled on the Byzantine, leaving Bulgar ethnic dominance broken. Boris shared the boyars' worries about the growing Greek presence in his state. He was aware that a Greek-speaking church organization in his lands operating under the authority of the Patriarch of Constantinople might result in clientage to the Byzantine Empire. Bulgar independence stood under direct threat. In 866 circumstances provided Boris with an opportunity to overcome the dire political situation created by conversion. An emotional schism dividing the churches of Constantinople and Rome had developed over the uncanonical election of the Constantinopolitan Patriarch. Photios, 858–67 and 877–86, a noted philosopher, was rushed through the clerical orders for eligibility to replace an illegally deposed predecessor. Pope Nicholas I, 858–67, originally tolerated Photios's election because he sought jurisdiction over the Western Balkans and Byzantine-controlled southern Italy in return for his support. When Photios proved ungrateful and did not make the payment, Nicholas excommunicated him as a usurper in late 866, and Photios reciprocated in kind. Seeking both recognition of his royal authority and ecclesiastical autonomy for his state's Christian church, Boris was not particular whether they came from Constantinople or Rome. He capitalized on the split between the two by playing a masterful diplomatic game. Boris requested missionaries from Rome to replace the Greek clergy already in his state. Pope Nicholas, however, refused Boris both a royal crown and an authorized autonomous state church organization. Then, after Michael III was overthrown by Basil I, 867–86, Photios was deposed as Byzantine Patriarch, and Basil determined that the Bulgar Church must be prevented from falling under papal authority. He called an ecumenical council in Constantinople during 869–70 to heal the Photian schism and pacted in favor of the Byzantine clergy. Over the objections of the small papal delegation, the Bulgars easily won recognition of an autonomous Bulgarian Orthodox Church from the Byzantine ecclesiastical authorities, carrying with it implied de facto recognition of Boris's royal prerogatives. Boris immediately sought to turn church autonomy into real political advantage. He needed some way of countering the increased Greek clerical presence following the council, but the Pope's adamant refusal to grant him state church autonomy precluded help from Rome. Once again events transpired in Boris's favor. Some of Methodios's disciples expelled from Moravia following his death arrived at the Bulgar state's borders in 886, bringing with them their Glagolitic liturgy. Boris welcomed the refugees with open arms, offered them his patronage, and helped them establish a missionary operation centered on Ohrid in Bulgar Macedonia, where they trained youths for the clergy and translated the entire Orthodox liturgy into Slavic. The newly trained Slavic-speaking priests then were sent among the state's Slav subjects. As their influence spread and the numbers of converts multiplied, a new sense of community and state was created within the population. Separate ethnic identities slowly merged into a common Bulgarian one, and regional or tribal loyalties perceptibly shifted to the state, personified by its now Christian ruler. A state of Bulgaria, as opposed to a Bulgar state, was born. Leading the successful Slavic mission in Bulgaria was Clement, Methodios's former disciple and head of the Ohrid mission, and his assistant Naum. Besides translation work, Clement established a school in Ohrid that trained students exclusively in the Slavic alphabet. Boris appointed him first archbishop of a Bulgarian Orthodox Church independent from the Greek archbishop seated in the capital at Pliska. While at first the new church used the Glagolitic alphabet originally designed by Constantine Cyril, a more simplified Slavic writing system was needed to increase the numbers of trained native Slavs in the church's ranks. Clement and Naum led the effort to design and propagate a new Slavic alphabet based on modified Greek letters, which they named Cyrillic in honor of their mentor. Cyrillic was precise in representing all Slavic phonics. The Greek liturgical texts in Bulgaria soon were translated into Slavic using the new letters, and native Bulgarian clergy were trained in Cyrillic literacy. From Macedonia the new alphabet spread throughout the extensive territories under Boris's control, permitting him to displace the Greek clergy in Bulgaria and to create an officially independent state church organization on the Byzantine model. Bulgarian independence from Byzantium thus was fortified. The Christianization of the Bulgarian population by Slavic-language missionary activity may have signaled the collapse of Turkic Bulgar culture in Bulgaria and the victory of ethnic Slavicization, but concrete supporting evidence regarding those processes is lacking. Ultimately the Turkic Bulgars were assimilated by the Slavs. The total Slavicization of the Bulgar elite most likely was a gradual result of the Slavic Cyrillic alphabet's success rather than its cause. In any event, Christianity swept away the pagan beliefs of both Slavs and Bulgars, and its propagation in Slavic lent the state and its population a common language that bound them together into a single people and culture. Boris emerged from his struggle for a Slavic church as the divinely ordained autocratic ruler of a culturally unified state with a loyal population. He adopted the trappings of an Orthodox Christian autocrat, based on the only available model, the Byzantine emperor. As Christian autocrat, he issued law codes, heavily influenced by Byzantine examples, revamped the state administration, erected churches, founded monasteries, and patronized religious arts. While he used Christianity for political purposes, he also was devout in his personal Christian beliefs. Members of his family, including his sister, already were Christians at the time of his baptism, and he took seriously his founding of Christian monastic communities. Boris was so deeply religious that, after a serious illness in 889, he abdicated the throne and retired to a monastery that he had established outside of Preslav. The legacy of Boris to both Bulgaria and the Orthodox world in general was important. His Christianizing efforts laid the foundation for a Slavic literary culture of far-reaching portent. All of Helleno-Christian culture was open to Slavic speakers through translation. Moreover, the new Bulgarian literary workers soon produced original works of their own, demonstrating that the Cyrillic alphabet was the most significant cultural tool created for the Slavs of Eastern Europe. Through it they could advance and expand their indigenous cultures in their native terms, permitting them to hold their own against foreign pressures that often threatened their very existence as ethnic entities. Because of Boris's astuteness, the future of the Serbs, Russians, Macedonians, and even of the non-Slavic Romanians was affected significantly. Vladimir, 889–93, Boris's eldest son and successor, sympathized with the anti-Christian and anti-Byzantine stance of the remaining Bulgar boyar elite. When he actively attempted to revive paganism in Bulgaria, Boris emerged from retirement and toppled him. A state council was convened in Preslav, a Slavic and Christian center, unlike traditionally pagan and boyar-dominated Pliska. The council recognized Vladimir's deposition, released Simeon, Boris's younger son, from monastic vows, and proclaimed Simeon ruler. Christianity was declared the official state religion, and Preslav was designated as the state's new capital. The council also may have installed Cyrillic Slavic as the official language of both church and state. Having saved his life's work, Boris then retired permanently to his monastery. Simeon I, 893–927, became the greatest of all Bulgarian rulers. He successfully overcame a series of state-threatening situations, won Byzantine recognition of Bulgaria's equal imperial status, and ultimately guaranteed 40 years of Bulgarian-Byzantine peaceful coexistence following the stormy warfare between them that characterized much of his reign. He was a consummate diplomat and a skilled military strategist as well as religiously devout and cultured. He excelled in patronizing monasticism, building projects, and, particularly, literary activity. Simeon apparently took a personal interest in historical writings and sponsored the first original Bulgarian literary works, such as those of Chernorizets Rabur and Ioan Exer. Ironically, Simeon was not groomed in childhood for the throne, that had been his elder brother's upbringing. Boris intended an Orthodox Church vocation for his younger son, culminating in his becoming Bulgarian archbishop or, if fortunate, patriarch. Simeon had been sent off to Constantinople as a teenager, where he became a monastic novice, took the name of Simeon, and spent a decade in religious study. He became fluent in Greek, and, on his return to Bulgaria, he took up residence in a monastery outside of Preslav, where he led a Greek-to-Slavic literary translation project before being elevated to the throne in 893. One of Simeon's first acts as ruler was the complete elimination of the Greek church hierarchy inside of Bulgaria. He confirmed Clement Oritsky as Western Bulgarian archbishop and raised the Bulgarian cleric Constantine to the bishopric of Preslav, which encompassed eastern Bulgaria. Greek authority was undercut completely, and the Greek clergy fled the state in droves. They were replaced by Slavic-speaking Bulgarian clerics, thus virtually assuring Bulgaria's complete religious independence. Preserving Bulgaria's political independence, however, was another matter. A trade conflict over changes in long-standing Byzantine-Bulgarian commercial relations initiated by Emperor Leo VI, 886–912, in 894 escalated into war. Early Bulgarian victories compelled Leo to seek Magyar assistance. While Leo's forces kept Simeon pinned in the south, his navy ferried the Magyars south across the Danube, after which they ravaged northeastern Bulgaria as far south as Preslav. Taken completely by surprise and tottering on the brink of defeat, Simeon demonstrated that he had learned Byzantine ways well. He appealed for help to the Pechenegs, a powerful Turkic steppe people and traditional enemies of the Magyars, who attacked them in their rear and drove the main body of Magyars west into Pannonia. With the northern threat neutralized, Simeon concentrated his forces on Byzantine Thrace, where he won a major victory near Adrianople in 896. A treaty confirming Simeon's control over most of the Balkans and granting him an annual tribute payment from the Byzantines was finalized in 897. 16 years of peace with Byzantium followed the treaty, permitting Simeon to conduct the munificent Slavic cultural patronage for which he became noted. By staging military threats during that period, Simeon was able to negotiate new territorial acquisitions in Macedonia and Thrace from Byzantium without actually fighting. See Map 3. War with the Byzantines resumed in 912 after Emperor Alexander, 912–13, refused to pay Simeon the annual tribute stipulated in the 897 treaty. Alexander's death soon after hostilities commenced, however, threw Byzantine state affairs into chaos. A hastily arranged regency council for young Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitos, 913–59, headed by Patriarch Nicholas Mystikos, 901–7 and 912–25, was forced to deal with Simeon, whose army was before Constantinople's walls by late 913. Negotiations led to major concessions on the part of the regents and to Mystikos meeting Simeon outside of the city's walls and performing some sort of coronation ceremony. What that coronation of Simeon actually signified remains uncertain to this day. There are four interpretations of the event's meaning. One is that Simeon was adopted as the emperor's spiritual son. A second is that he was bestowed the rank of Caesar, as Tervel had been by Justinian II 2 centuries earlier. A third view is that, since young Constantine VII apparently became betrothed to one of Simeon's daughters, he was crowned the official imperial father-in-law, the Basiliapater. The fourth and most probable interpretation is that Mystikos actually crowned Simeon emperor of the Bulgarians. It certainly was a title, Tsar in Slavic, that Simeon used after the event, and it made perfect sense once Bulgaria became a Christian state. The traditional pagan Bulgar title of Han had little appeal to Christian rulers, while that of emperor encompassed the rank and prestige of the old title but linked them to the Christian Byzantine political model. Byzantine political philosophy permitted the acceptance of such a title for non-Byzantine rulers because, no matter the titles of others, the Byzantine emperor remained the supreme earthly authority figure. The fly in the ointment for Simeon was that his new title was conferred by a weak regency council and not by an emperor in person. Early in 914 Mystikos and his co-regents were overthrown by Zoe, young Constantine's mother, who attempted to negate the coronation agreement. Simeon compelled Zoe to recognize the arrangement by military force. Yet Zoe's government was as unstable as the former regency, so her acknowledgement of Simeon's imperial title carried no guarantee of permanent official Byzantine legitimization. Proof soon came in 917, when Zoe attempted to renege on her peace with Simeon. She enlisted the Pechenegs for a joint assault on Bulgaria in an attempt to shore up support for her regime. The war was completely unprovoked. Zoe sent a fleet to ferry the Pechenegs across the Danube in coordination with the landing of the main Byzantine army on Bulgaria's Black Sea coast. Perhaps bought off by their old ally Simeon, the Pechenegs failed to appear. Simeon then smashed the invading army outside of Pomeri, Anchialos, inflicting the most crushing Byzantine defeat since Crum's massacre of Nikephoros a century earlier. Having cleared Thrace of Byzantine forces, Simeon found himself in a dilemma similar to that which had faced Crum. He consistently won on the battlefield, but without a fleet to cut the capital off from the sea, he could not force a conclusive decision on the Byzantines, who could hold out behind the protection of Constantinople's impregnable land walls. To make matters worse, for 3 years after Pomeri, Simeon had no set government in Constantinople with which to negotiate. Zoe was deposed in early 919, and there followed a period of instability until Romanos I Lecapenus, 920–44, was installed as senior emperor to the teenager Constantine VII. Meanwhile, Simeon was distracted during the early 920s by events in the small Serbian state on his western border. After the death of its first ruler, Vlastimir, Serbia suffered from a protracted succession struggle. In the 890s Petar Gojniković, 892–917, secured both the princely throne and Simeon's protection. Peace between Serbia and Bulgaria lasted until 917, during which time Slavic Christianity penetrated among the Serbs from their powerful neighbor. In 917 Petr was ousted by Pavel Brnović, 917–21, who allied himself with the Byzantines once on the throne. In a confusing welter of local border military operations, the Serbs briefly managed to preserve their state's independence from Bulgarian control under Knez, Prince, Zaharij Prevoslavljevic, 921–24, although Simeon won clientage from numerous Serb tribes not part of the Serbian state. While Simeon toyed with the Serbs, he continued inflicting bloody defeats on the Byzantines and ravaging the empire's territories as far as Constantinople and Corinth. Byzantine diplomacy foiled his attempt to gain a North African Arab fleet for a combined assault on Byzantium's capital. In 923 Simeon once again brought his army before Constantinople, pillaged its suburbs, and successfully demanded a meeting with Emperor Romanos. To forestall any ambushes by either side, the two wary rulers met outside of the city walls on a jetty built out over the Golden Horn. What exactly was discussed is unknown, but apparently a peace was agreed on, but no document signed, and Romanos recognized Simeon's imperial title and status as equal to his own. Simeon then marched north, and in 924 he launched a military avalanche on Serbia to settle affairs there. Defeated Serbia was ravaged and annexed to Bulgaria. Romanos refused to ratify the agreement he had reached with Simeon. He was willing to pay Simeon an annual tribute but balked at Simeon using the title Emperor of the Bulgars and Romans. Whether Simeon actually used that specific title is unknown, the only sources are hostile Byzantine ones. If Simeon did, it may not have signified a claim to the Byzantine throne so much as a proclamation of his right to rule over former Roman, Byzantine, subjects and lands that the Bulgars had won from the Byzantine Empire since the late 7th century. In such a case, the title's use was a claim to Bulgarian territorial legitimacy. Just as likely, however, Simeon's alleged use of the title may have proclaimed his intention of replacing Byzantium with his Bulgarian Empire as the divinely ordained Christian world state. Serbia's annexation brought Bulgaria a shared border with the Kingdom of Croatia in the Balkans northwest, which was governed by its greatest medieval ruler Tomislav, ca. 910–28, an ally of Byzantium. Throughout the 9th century Dalmatian Croatia, although technically under Frank suzerainty, drew closer to the Byzantine orbit. A rebuilt Byzantine navy brought most of the Dalmatian coastal cities back under direct imperial control in the 9th century. The Croats remained entrenched surrounding the cities and in the hinterlands under a prince of their own. Although some Croat tribes accepted Byzantine suzerainty, an active Byzantine presence in Dalmatia declined as a result of Byzantium's bitter struggle with Simeon's Bulgaria, and the region essentially was left to its own devices. A Dalmatian Croat rebellion in 875 ended Frank suzerainty and an independent state was created, although the Franks retained control of Pannonian Croatia for a while longer. The princely throne of the new state proved unstable, with occupants following one another in rapid succession. The most significant development occurred in 879 when, as a result of one of the normal coups that determined Croat leadership, the successful claimant Branimir, 879–92, pledged his state's loyalty to the Pope. From that time on, Dalmatian Croatia received papal recognition of its independence in return for Rome's spiritual jurisdiction within the state. Tomislav gained the throne of Dalmatian Croatia sometime around 910, consolidated an army and navy, and liberated Pannonian Croatia from depredations inflicted by the Magyars, who had settled on the Pannonian plain after 895 and were terrorizing their neighbors. Tomislav incorporated Pannonian Croatia under his rule and established a border with the Magyars along the Drava River, creating the first united Croat state. His Croatia probably included Dalmatia, what is today Croatia proper, Slavonia, and the greater part of Bosnia. There was no permanent capital, but Tomislav's chief residence appears to have been Beograd on the Dalmatian coast. Around 923 Tomislav concluded an alliance with Byzantium against Simeon. Fearful of being caught between the Byzantines in the south and Croatia in the northwest, Simeon invaded Tomislav's lands in 926 but suffered a resounding defeat. Tomislav was crowned king about that time and emerged as the ruler of a militarily strong state. With his death in 928, however, united Croatia disintegrated in civil war. As one of his final political acts, in 926 Simeon proclaimed his imperial status by elevating the Bulgarian archbishopric of Ohrid to the level of an independent patriarchate, thus completing the Byzantine Orthodox cultural model in Bulgaria. The all-powerful Orthodox Christian Bulgarian Tsar now ruled in partnership with an official native patriarchal Orthodox Church. Both were cloaked in all of the outward trappings of Byzantine ceremonial. The Byzantine forms couched in the Slavic cultural dress of Simeon's Bulgaria became the model for all future non-Byzantine states within Orthodox European civilization, in particular, Serbia and Russia. Many historians refer to the rise of a Byzantine Commonwealth in describing the phenomenon. If so, Simeon's Bulgaria set the precedents and standards for its future membership. While on his way to beleaguer Constantinople once again in 927 and to force the Byzantine authorities to recognize his imperial status officially, Simeon died. Although imperceptible at the time, his demise marked the beginning of Bulgaria's decline.